Welcome to the program. Let's begin from Parliament, where Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is expected to appear before the House today to answer 16 questions from different members of the House. He is also expected to deliver a statement on how government funds have been utilized in the fight against COVID-19. Let's cross over to the House, where my colleague Abdallah Mohammed is currently stationed for more.
Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 expenditures have been broadly provided for in pages 274.3 and 274 in the 2021 budget statement and economic policy, and also page 335 of the 2022 budget. Beyond that, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the granular issues at the various ministries, departments, and agencies, the arms of government, including Parliament, as well as constitutional bodies, and also the state enterprises. I'm afraid that the committees would do a great job. The ministry does follow these bodies on the various paths of expenditure, apart from the report they submit to the ministry. Notwithstanding this, and to set minds at ease, I'm here for the avoidance of doubt to respond to the allocations made to the various bodies and institutions. Mr. Speaker, on 11th March 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. This moment has marked a defining moment in world history, and its impact still reverberates globally. Mr. Speaker, here in Ghana, we recorded our first 2 cases on 12 March 2020. His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo immediately put together a task force which spearheaded of a bold and decisive strategy to ensure that we are not overwhelmed by the pandemic. In line with this strategy, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy of Ghana was assessed and measures designed to address its impact. However, the impact of the pandemic was even more severe than anticipated, both globally and domestically. It has upended and exposed the weaknesses in critical structures and systems in education, health, economic life, and communities. The pandemic triggered a sharp and heavy disruption in global supply chains as lockdowns and restrictions led to reductions in demand and production levels. Mr. Speaker, this has required us to undertake major fiscal measures beyond what we programmed prior to the pandemic to finance the additional expenditure such as support to households, engagement of additional health personnel, deployment of security personnel at our borders to enforce the COVID-19 protocols, as well as the procurement of personal protective equipment. Government has had to adopt major fiscal measures to accommodate the increased expenditures and the shortfalls in revenue. Though our response was bold, decisive, and compassionate, it has also been costly. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that on 30th March 2020, I made a statement to Parliament on the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy of Ghana, following which the implementation of the Coronavirus Alleviation Program commenced. Furthermore, during the presentation of the 2020 mid-year fiscal policy, I indicated that the supplementary request included a program funding of 19.3 billion from various funding sources to support the budget both directly and indirectly. On the expenditure side, an amount of 11.16 billion was programmed for COVID-19 related expenses, detailed attached as Appendix 1. The difference of 8.14 billion was programmed to provide for shortfalls in revenue. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the budget programmed the total amount of 4.6 billion for COVID-19 related expenses, detailed attached as Appendix 2. It is worth noting that the Ministry of Finance mobilized the need while the various COVID-19 interventions and related expenses were implemented by the relevant sector ministries and agencies. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on businesses and households, ensure that economic activities recover and minimize job losses, government mobilized 18.19 billion out of the program 19.3 billion in 2020 from various funding sources as shown in Table 1 to support the budget. GOG contingency fund of 1.2 billion, World Bank of 1.3 billion, IMF 1 billion program, AFDB 405 million, EU 504 million, BOG bonds 10 billion, summing up to 19.3 billion. Mr. Speaker, government program funding of 1,203,715,085 cedis to finance the coronavirus alleviation program. This program focused on achieving 5 key objectives: limit and stop the importation of the virus, contain its spread, provide adequate care for the sick, limit the impact of the virus on social and economic life, and inspire the expansion of our domestic capability and deepen our self-reliance. The Ministry of Health also led the preparation and implementation of the Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan, which was financed with funds from the World Bank. An amount of $230 million was secured from various facilities under the World Bank to support the implementation of COVID-19 Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan. The funding facilities included the Fast Track COVID-19 facility, $35 million. This financing is Ghana's share of the World Bank's $4 billion Fast Track COVID-19 facility that was announced in March 2020 to enable countries deal with the pandemic. GARID SEC 65 million. This amount was drawn from the existing World Bank-funded Greater Accra Resilient Development Project by activating the contingency response component of the project. An additional financing of $130 million in November 2020 to strengthen and scale up the gains of the EPRP. Mr. Speaker, an additional financing of $200 million was also secured in 2021, largely for the acquisition and deployment of COVID-19 vaccines to support other sources of financing of the vaccination program under this plan. The plan sought to achieve the following: strengthen coordination of the overall preparedness activities. Strengthen capacity of regions, priority health facilities, and points of entry to prevent, rapidly detect, investigate, and control any COVID-19 outbreak in Ghana. Strengthen national capacity for laboratory surveillance and diagnostics. Build capacity for early diagnosis, case management, contact tracing, and infection prevention and control. Ensure minimum health logistics are in place in prioritized regions, health facilities, and points of entry for preparedness and laboratory capacity sustained for timely and quality testing of COVID-19 samples. And increase public awareness on COVID-19 risk mitigation and response measures. Budget support. Mr. Speaker, in addition to all the above sources of funds, other funds were sourced to support the budget. These include the US $1 billion from the International Monetary Fund, 10 billion Ghana cedis from the Bank of Ghana, $69.3 million from the Africa Development Bank, and $99.7 million from the European Union. By the grace of the Almighty God, through our well-designed plans and the internal and external funds we mobilize, government provided support to the frontline health workers, protected livelihoods and job losses, demonstrated care to the vulnerable in society, and supported small businesses. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measure excludes funds of the National COVID-19 Trust Fund and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2020 and 2021, the program expenditure amounted to $15.763 million for the COVID-19 related expenditure, out of which the actual utilization was $12.036 million. In 2020, a total amount of $11.162 million, this includes a cap, was programmed for COVID-19 related expenditure, Out of this amount, a total of 8.12 billion was utilized. The amount was utilized to provide support to households, supply equipment, and provide relief to health workers, health infrastructure, security operations, evacuations, quarantine and coordination, economic relief, stabilization and revitalization, and COVID-19 complementary releases. Mr. Speaker, a total amount of 4.6 billion was programmed in the 2021 budget for COVID-19 related expenses. At the end of 2021, total utilization was 3.9 billion, representing 85% utilization. Expenditure on COVID-19 falls within the following broad categories: supports to household, health responses, health infrastructure, security operations, economic relief, COVID-19 vaccines, other COVID-related expenditure, all summing up to the 12.03 billion. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I wish to dispel the notion that there have been inconsistencies in government data on COVID-19. His Excellency the President intimated during the State of the Nation address on 30th March 2022 that we had mobilized about 17.7 billion since 2020 to fight the pandemic. We subsequently reconciled the data, and I can report that as of end May 2022, we've mobilized 18.19 billion to mitigate the effect of the pandemic. Again, when His Excellency the Vice President indicated on 7th April 2022 at the National TESCON Conference that government has spent 8.1 billion on COVID-19, it was within the context of expenditures for 2020, as I've already indicated. Right Honorable Speaker, permit me to use this occasion to highlight the financial management and accountability framework for receipt and use of public funds, especially as relates to COVID-19. All public expenditures are incurred from funds approved by the Honorable House. These expenditures may be drawn from the Consolidated Fund, Contingency Fund, or other statutory funds earmarked for specific purposes. At the onset of COVID-19, the Ministry of Finance applied for and obtained approval of Parliament to lower the cap on the Stabilization Fund. This enabled the transfer of approximately 1.2 billion to the Contingency Fund. Upon approval by Parliament, 1.2 billion was drawn from the Contingency Fund to support government efforts to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. In the 2020 Mid-Year Fiscal Policy Review, revisions were made to the 2020 budget as well as executive decisions made to mitigate the effect of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the 2021 budget included the necessary provisions to facilitate mitigation of the residual effects of COVID-19 and to facilitate the revitalization of the Ghanaian economy. To ensure transparency and accountability in the use of funds earmarked for COVID-19 mitigation, existing financial management rules and regulations were used to disburse funds whilst ensuring the necessary timelines required in dealing with the pandemic were met. Mr. Speaker, in line with our financial management rules and regulations, all covered entities keep records and subject themselves to internal audit on a continuous basis, as well as external annual audits by the Supreme Audit Institution of Ghana, the Audit Service. Mr. Speaker, in the 2020 Mid-Year Review and Supplementary Estimates, I presented a comprehensive update on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures government have put in place to contain it. Furthermore, in the 2021 budget, government presented to this august House the budget statement and economic policy, including a detailed breakdown and justification for the COVID-19 expenditure, including a statement showing the sources of funds and expenditure on COVID-19, and this was duly approved by the House. Again, in November 2021, when I presented the 2022 budget, I provided further updates and schedules on COVID-19 expenditure. Mr. Speaker, I now proceed to provide additional details on the COVID-19 expenditure that I have listed. Support to households. Mr. Speaker, Total amount programmed for the initiatives under the support to households in 2020 was 1.718 billion, out of which amount utilized was 1.55 billion. The details include a total amount of 12.1 million for the distribution of packed hot food in Accra, Temakasua, and Greater Kumasi. This includes the cost of transportation of packed food in some suburbs of Greater Kumasi by NADMO. The expenditure for the provision of hot meals during the lockdown served about 2.7 million persons for the period of the lockdown at a unit cost of 4 cedis, 32 pesos. A total amount of 42.24 million was expended on distribution of dry food packages through faith-based organizations in Greater Accra and Kumasi. A total of about 470,000 persons received these food packages. As part of the support to households, Mr. Speaker, governments through the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and its agency, Ghana Water Company Limited, provided free water, which initially lasted for the period April to September 2020. Following an executive directive, this was extended to December 2020 for lifeline consumers. The distribution was also carried out by the Community Water and Sanitation Agency and other smallholder water supply organizations. An amount of 556 million was budgeted in 2020 for this program, out of which 456 million was utilized. In 2021, a total allocation of 200 million Ghana cedis was made for the provision of free water and electricity for lifeline consumers, out of which 143 million was utilized. Government also made provision in the budget for free electricity to lifeline consumers and absorbed 50% of all electricity bills for all residential and commercial customers. A total cost of 1.04 billion was utilized for the policy from April to September 2020. Health response supplies, equipment and relief for health workers. Mr. Speaker, the total amount programmed for the measures under the health response in 2020 was 1.522 billion, out of which an amount of 1.049 billion was utilized. The details are as follows. A total amount of 2 million cedis for busing health workers within Accra, Kumasi, and Kasua to and from work for the duration of the lockdown, and Metro Mass transport. The whole amount was utilized, with 0.7 million going to CAPTI and 1.3 million going to support the services of the Metro Mass Transport Company. A total of 80 million Ghana cedis was programmed to pay 50% of the basic salary as allowance for frontline workers. All requests have been reconciled and paid. Total 1.44 billion was programmed for the provision of PPEs, testing kits, and medical equipment, as well as to undertake community engagements. Other expenditure includes communication, quarantine, and treatment for COVID-19. An amount of 1.01 billion was utilized. Health infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, in the wake of the pandemic, government took a bold decision to provide health infrastructure in the districts and regions that did not have a district or regional hospital. In all 111 district, regional, and mental hospitals, Agenda 111 were programmed for construction. A total of 600 million Ghana cedis was released to begin the construction across the country in 2020. In the 2021 budget, an amount of 779 million was programmed for the continuation of Agenda 111 projects. Out of this, an amount of 763.92 million has been released. Mr. Speaker, government programmed a total amount of 1.2 billion for security operations, evacuation of Ghanaians stranded abroad, and coordination of MMDA sanitation and disinfection exercises. As of 31st December 2020, amount of 875 million was utilized. This expenditure was utilized by the Ministries of Local Government and Rural Development, the Interior, Justice and Attorney General, Defense, National Security, and God. Mr. Speaker, in addition, measures to stabilize the economy after the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, government also implemented programs to revitalize the economy and protect jobs. These include the Coronavirus Alleviation Program Business Support Scheme, CAPBUZ, by the NBSSI, now the Ghana Enterprise Agency, which provided soft loans to 302,000 small and medium-scale businesses across the country to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic and protect jobs. A total of 600 million was utilized. The Ghana Cares Over Tampa program was launched in November 2020 in the real sector of the economy. Total amount released as at the end of 2021 was 539 million Ghana cedis out of the total program amount of 1.5 billion cedis. And the establishment of the Development Bank of Ghana to address gaps in the Ghanaian credit markets, especially the availability of medium and long-term finance for the private sector. A total amount of 853 million has been transferred to the bank as seed capital. Mr. Speaker, other measures include the transfer of 1.5 million to the statutory funds in line with the approved budget to enable them to deliver on their mandate. This was occasioned by the non-performance of revenues largely due to the global lockdowns, and the payment of 1.267 billion to contractors to settle outstanding indebtedness to contractors that were programmed to be paid in 2020, with revenues collected, as well as ease the financial burden that arose due to the outbreak of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, due to the COVID-19 protocols, the Electoral Commission and National Identification Authority had to increase their registration sites and recruit more personnel to ensure compliance during the registration and voting. An amount of 401 million was transferred to the NIA and EC as additional support to ensure COVID-19 compliant registration and voting. National COVID-19 response to school reopening. Mr. Speaker, in September 2020, while other countries had closed all schools, government, with advice of experts, took the bold decision to partially reopen schools to enable final year students write their final exams under very strict COVID-19 protocols. This was largely successful, with minimal infections among the students. An amount of 1.119.73 billion was allocated for mass school reopening in January 2021. This was to ensure that all students and teachers were provided with infection prevention and control items. Total amount utilized was 1.118 billion. Procurement of COVID-19 vaccines. Mr. Speaker, the acceleration of sustained socio-economic recovery through advances in vaccine development required the mobilization of significant resources to enable the deployment of a mass vaccination program. The urgent need to vaccinate a target of 20 million people to achieve herd immunity and strengthen the health system in Ghana required the government of Ghana makes a significant allocation for the purchase of vaccines. A total amount of 929.3 million was therefore allocated in the 2021 budget for the procurement of vaccines. The National Deployment and Vaccination Plan estimated an amount of $51.6 million to undertake the vaccination deployment. A total amount of 776 million Ghana cedis was released for the purchase of Sputnik V, the Johnson CoV-SARS-2 COVID vaccines, and the emergency deployment of vaccines in schools. As of 31st March 2022, a total of 5.4 million vaccines have been supplied and received into the country since the commencement of the COVID-19 campaign, March 2nd, 2021. 14.3 million doses of vaccines have been administered as of April 25th, 2022. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this presentation demonstrates government's commitment to accountability and transparency. All program mobilized and utilized funds have been duly reported on. As a government, we continue to operate an open door policy and welcome any opportunity to engage in the national interest. Let me reiterate that never before in the history of the Fourth Republic has the entire Ghanaian economy and society experienced such severe shock occasioned by a single external event. Indeed, from independence to date, The Ghanaian economy has never faced such a sudden, nationwide dramatic reduction in household and corporate economic activity. But as the President said in one of his addresses to the nation during the coronavirus outbreak, our survival is in our hands and it continues to be in our hands. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity and God bless our homeland, Ghana.
Honorable members, you've heard the Minister for Finance. I just want to remind you of Order 70 again, and will permit comments to be made by members. I have the guide from leaders that the intention is for me to recognize 3 members from each side of the divide plus 1. 1 being a member from each side of the leadership of the House. The left side have submitted the 4 names. I'm waiting on the right side to submit their 4 names. And so whilst I wait on the right side, I will start by giving the left the first shot in terms of comments, the statement made by the Minister of Finance. The first person I've been guided to give the opportunity is the Honorable Atuforson. Honorable Member, comments. You may go on, please.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to make some comment on the statement that was delivered by our Minister responsible for Finance. Mr. Speaker, I have 3 major concerns on the very statement that was delivered by our Minister. Mr. Speaker, the first one relates to the fact that the Minister accounting for the sources of financing or sources of fund for the amount they received to tackle COVID-19. One part in it is the COVID-19 Trust Fund that was established by the President of the Republic of Ghana. Because any amount that accrued to the fund is public fund, and it should be accounted as such. Mr. Speaker, if I decide to donate money to fight a pandemic, that money is not private money. That money was received by state actor, and it should be accounted for as such. And so, therefore, in showing us the sources of funding, that particular line is conspicuously missing. And I urge the Minister to come again on that one, because we need to get some accountability on that one. So, Speaker, that's the first point. So, Speaker, it does not matter. It is public money. And when you receive public money, you account for it. That is what you should do. So, Speaker, the second point has to do with the fact that our Minister responsible for Finance has said that he received money from 6 different areas. The first one is COVID-19 GOG Contingency Fund, 1.2 billion. He's gone on to say that World Bank Group Fund Health Intervention, 1.3 billion. He lined of which, and showed all of the amount to prove that he's gotten 1.3 billion. IMF, 1 billion. AFDB, an amount of 405.6 million. And then EU and BOG, COVID-19 bond, 10 billion. If you add all of them, he's saying 19.3 billion. So, Speaker, granted that he's received 19.3 billion. But what I can see here is that he has said that so far, from 2020 to December 2021, he has spent 12 billion of that money, 12 billion. What he has failed to do is to tell us that between the 19.3 billion and the 12 billion, the difference of 7.3 billion, where the money is and what they have used the money for. So, Speaker, you have mobilized 19.3 billion from your own document. So, Speaker, I make reference to the document. First, I'm making reference to page 4, table 1. Page 4, table 1. I receive it at the same time as you receive it. Page 4, table 1. Table 1 says that you have mobilized 19.3 billion sources of funding. Funding sources, 19.3 billion. That is what is there. So, Speaker, if you go further to the same document, page 6, item A, expenditure on COVID-19. It gives us status of utilization of 2020 and 2021 COVID-19. So, Speaker, the last item, it gives you the amount they budgeted, the amount they have released so far. And he said that so far, they have released 12 billion. So my argument is that if you've mobilized 19 billion and you've spent 12 billion, at least give us an indication. You received IMF 1 billion. You are telling us that you raised a bond of 10 billion. You're also telling us that you had some sources from World Bank. You've given us the numbers. But you have spent 12 billion. Give us an idea where the rest of the money is. The bond that you received, the IMF money that you received, where is the rest of that money? So, Speaker, I think it's a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question, and that is my second point. So, Speaker, Mr. Speaker, so the difference here that I am seeing is 7.3 billion Ghana cedis unaccounted for, and I want to find out where is that money. It's legitimate. So, Speaker, my third point relates to the fact that our minister responsible for finance has given us an indication that he spent 12 billion Ghana cedis so far, 2020 and 2021. The Speaker, my concern has to do with the fact that, yes, he has given us some headline items. He said to us, and it is also in the media review of the year 2021, Government of Ghana's media review. And if you refer to page 101, appendix 4.3 of the media, 4E of the media review, the same thing has been stated here. Mr. Speaker, the minister had said, and let me commend him for the consistency in reporting. Mr. Speaker, page 101 of the media review. It's also in the same statement, appendix 1 of the media of the document that he's given to us. He said, Mr. Speaker, that they have spent 598 million at the time, from January to June 2021, 598 million, equivalent to $1 billion for the purposes of, $100 million for the purposes of payment for nose masks, hand sanitizers, and Veronica buckets. Mr. Speaker, my concern is, yes, you spend 598 million for nose masks, hand sanitizers, and Veronica bucket for the reopening of schools. But at what cost? We need the fine details, expenditure returns of that. Expenditure returns. So, Speaker, you went on in your own document. You said that you paid 36 million for the design of Agenda 111. For who? 36 million. For what purpose? Design of Agenda 111. So, Speaker, in the same document, he went on to say, page 100 of the media review, again stated here, and that's what I'm saying, I commend you for the consistency. So, Speaker, he says here that Agenda 111, January to December 2020, Provision of health infrastructure, Agenda 111, district and regional hospital, 600 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, my question is, you spent 600 million for Ghana cedis for Agenda 111. Noble idea. But have they used the money? And at what time? I know the president cut the sword for Agenda 111 in 2021. But this money was spent in 2020. So, Speaker, I think it is fair for me to ask this question. So, Speaker, on that basis, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to invoke Article 103 of the Constitution. To invoke Article 103 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that says the Parliament shall appoint standing committees or any other committee as may be necessary for the effective discharge of its function. So, Speaker, we cannot sit here and say that the Minister of Finance should be the only one accounting for the COVID amount. So, Speaker, the Minister responsible for Finance is only a conduit of releasing the money. But the monies were spent at the various MDAs. The monies were spent at various MDAs. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to set up an ad hoc committee so that we can bring the various heads of the MDAs, in particular, that spent the money, to account for this in detail.
I don't want to call your name. Yes. Honorable Atoforsen, you may sum up. If I hear you shout across the aisle, I'll be compelled to name you.
I'm not.
Please. Yes. May you conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I'm concluding. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling on you, Mr. Speaker, to use the powers under the Constitution, Article 101, to set up 103 of the Constitution, to set up an ad hoc committee to particularly get the various covered entities that spent the money to account for it in detail. So, Speaker, yes, I've seen a bold attempt by giving us some headline items. I acknowledge that. But there are gaps. The gaps, I cannot ask the minister responsible for finance to give me the details of the fact that they spent $100 million on nose masks and hand sanitizers. I have to ask the minister who purchased that. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you that this committee must be established by this House, chaired by a member of the minority committee, so that we can go into the details to get the details out, and all of us will be able to get the facts as we need to. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, I gave the ranking member for finance ample time because he's a ranking member on the committee for finance. I will apply same to the, I think it's the chairman, vice chairman, who will be speaking for on behalf of the chairman, the same time to also make comments. So chairman, vice chairman for the committee on finance, please, you can do so now. Make your comments now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very disappointed in my colleague, Honorable Atoforsen. I expected much from him. I expected in-depth analysis of what he's been spewing on the airwaves and blindfolding the minds of the good people of this country that there's been something untoward with regards to the COVID-19 expenditure. He didn't even read the report, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me refer you to paragraph...
Honorable Vice Chairman, you are to make comments on the statement made by the minister. You are not to debate. You are to make comments, and in fact, the deputy majority leader emphasized this. So go on with your comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your guidance. Mr. Speaker, let me refer you to paragraph 15 of the statement made by the Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measures excludes funds of the National COVID-19 Trust Fund and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund. Mr. Speaker, it must be put on record that my colleague never read the statement and did not advert his mind today. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our colleagues have been on the rampage. Our colleagues have been on the rampage trying to foul the atmosphere in this country with regards to the expenditures that the minister has ably presented to the House. Mr. Speaker, a summary of the expenditures are captured on pages 14 and 15 of the statement. Mr. Speaker, in March 2020, when the COVID-19 outbreak occurred, we all were very scared and did not have any clue about this pandemic. It took a responsible government to devise a very deliberate plan to protect us. Mr. Speaker, all the 275 members in this chamber are alive. We all benefited one way or the other from the relief that have been presented to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that our spouses were even privileged to come to the hospital or the clinic to get their jabs. Where were we going to get the monies from, Mr. Speaker? How many of us didn't benefit from the free water supply as captured in this report? How many of us didn't benefit from the free electricity? The lifeline consumers, and Minister of Energy is here. Our constituents. How many of you didn't benefit? Mr. Speaker, we are here for accountability. That is why the minister on pages 14 and 15 has given us an elaborate expenditure plan, which cannot be criticized by your good self. You haven't been able to punch any meaningful hole in the expenditure as provided for by the minister. We expected much from the minority. You've disappointed the people of this country. You've told them a lot that the government has concealed a lot of expenditures under this COVID-19 relief. To hear your ranking member or our ranking member on finance speak, rather commending a minister of finance, I doff my heart for the minister of finance for being honest and consistent, as stated by Honorable Atufosi. Mr. Speaker, Agenda 111. The minister said, and rightly so, that he set aside 600 million for this elaborate program. COVID-19 exposed Ghana's health system to the extent that most districts in this country did not have health facilities. What did a thinking government do? A thinking government decided that, look, let me take advantage of this pandemic and spread health infrastructure across the country. How do I start it? I have to make provision for in the budget. Fortunately for us, our colleagues and ourselves approved the budget and included that money. 700 million cedis was also added, making it 1.3 billion. Projects are ongoing across the districts. We as a country must look for additional funds to ensure that our brothers in Bunkrugu, Okankwe Central, and across the country have access to quality health care. Not my sister from Adan having a beautiful hospital in Adan. We all need Adan Hospital in Impoho. Mr. Speaker, it is heartwarming that this matter is being settled today, once and for all, and that a call for an ad hoc committee is an afterthought. To the extent that the minister has spent time to give us a detailed expenditure, it is really uncalled for to waste the time of the Ghanaian. At the end of the day, the Auditor General will come back to this country with his report. And that committee is chaired by the Deputy Minority Leader, who is very knowledgeable in that space. Use your intellect to criticize the Auditor General's report and the report from the MMDAs, and we'll come and answer. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I think the Vice Chair has done well by making the comments within a very few minutes. I will now move on to my left side, and from the list submitted is the turn of Honorable Kwabena Akando.
I'm most grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on the statement delivered by the Minister responsible for Finance. Mr. Speaker, this statement is the very reason why a bipartisan committee must be constituted to probe the entire expenditure on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, I will point to few inaccuracies in the statement presented by the Minister responsible for Finance. Mr. Speaker, that must not be entertained on this floor. Mr. Speaker, may I refer you to page 7, paragraph 19. Mr. Speaker, with your permission. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I wish to dispel the notion that there have been inconsistencies in government data on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President intimated during the State of the Nation address on 30th March 2022 that we had mobilized, Mr. Speaker, the emphasis is mine, about 17.7 billion since 2020. Mr. Speaker, that is not what the President said. Mr. Speaker, may I refer you to the State of the Nation address, and that is on page 5. Page 5. Mr. Speaker, the very first line. In all data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion, which is 4.6% of the GDP, has been spent, not mobilized. Mr. Speaker, there's a clear difference between what has been mobilized and what has been spent. Why do you do this to Parliament? Mr. Speaker, this between him and the President, who is telling us the truth. Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, if you check, Mr. Speaker, if you check the statement that has been given to us, especially table, Mr. Speaker, especially Appendix 1, status of utilization of 2022 COVID-19 budget. Mr. Speaker, this statement tells us, Mr. Speaker, that an amount of 600 million Ghana cedis was released with respect to Agenda 111. As of 2020, Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, Agenda 111 was actually commissioned, the sword was cut on the 17th of August 2021. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, that money was released as far back as 2020, which is clearly captured here. What was that money used for? Mr. Speaker, these are all issues that we demand answers. And Mr. Speaker, knowing very well the rules of contributing or commenting on statements, we cannot use statements to resolve these issues. Mr. Speaker, again, let me refer you to paragraph 28 of the statement. They spent hotmail, and they spent 4.3 Ghana cedis on each person, and they spent on about 2,744 people. Mr. Speaker, if you do the computation, you are arriving at around 11.9 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, there's a huge difference of about 240, almost 243,000 Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the minister is telling us that, Mr. Speaker, that money was used for transportation within the metropolis. Mr. Speaker, I think that we need to know the details of these expenditure. This is actually not enough. And that will give us the opportunity, even if possible, to subpoena other documents to probe further. So, Mr. Speaker, coming by a statement will not help us. And therefore, I support the call that this House constitute a bipartisan committee to look into this matter. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Honorable members, it's now the turn of the Honorable Deputy Minister of Finance, Honorable Abina Osei Asare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on the statement on the floor. Mr. Speaker, both speakers from the other side are missing one thing, and that if they had read, Mr. Speaker, if they had read paragraph 6 of the minister's statement, they would have realized that the minister said, yes, the total inflow for 2020 was 19.3 billion. And out of that, they used some to directly fund COVID-19 expenditures, and others were indirectly. One, on the expenditure side, we allocated 1.16 billion, and directly. And Mr. Speaker, the difference of 8.1 billion was what we used to shore up the budget. You remember we came to this House and revised the expenditure, revised the revenue numbers by close to 11.1 billion as a result of the effects of COVID. So the difference between the 11.1 and the 19.3 is what we used to shore up the budget. If you revise your revenue numbers down by 11.1 billion and you shore it up with a difference of 8.1 billion, clearly you've accounted for the 19.3 billion. And then I want to also go to page 5. I also want to go to page 7, paragraph 19. And it was quoted that the president said they had spent 8.1 billion on COVID-19 fund. When you come to page 6, clearly it is correct. You see it here that what we utilized, what we spent, what we utilized is actually 8.1 billion. So clearly, today the minister has put to rest the inconsistencies being said or yes, by our minority brothers and sisters. And today it is very clear that we have been consistent. Yes, it was 19.3 billion that came in. We have been able to account for the 19.3 billion. 8.1 billion was used directly for COVID-19 expenditure, and the difference was used to shore up the revenue numbers that dropped. Again, when you go to 2021, we put in the budget an expenditure of 4.6 billion for direct COVID-19 expenditures. And clearly, we've been able to account for the 3.9 billion that we utilized. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see the need why our colleagues on the other side are asking for a special audit in this. Clearly, the Auditor General at the end of the day will also look into this. This is what we have, and this is what I believe the Auditor General is also going to look at. One thing that I also want to point out that was out there was the specific inflows from the World Bank. Our colleagues on the other side also mentioned in various forums that this was not fully accounted for. Clearly, the $435 million that came from the World Bank has been accounted for on paragraph 11. When you look at it, it says that paragraph 11I, there was a fast-track amount of $35 million US. And then when you go to paragraph 11II, it says there was another 65 billion, which we have accounted for. And paragraph 11III, there's another 130 million US that also came from the World Bank. And in paragraph 12, it says 200 million also came from the World Bank. This we have all accounted for. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that today we are putting the matter to rest. All the monies that came in 2020, that 19.3 billion, we have accounted for it through the table that has been provided here, where we have 8.1 billion being utilized, and then the difference is what we use to shore up the revenue numbers. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 was a rare thing. We had never seen this before, but yet still, this government thought it wise and saw that the most important thing to do was to save lives and also to protect lives and save the economy. So two things this government did. First was to, in the midst of the pandemic, was to save lives and protect livelihoods. And that is what we did in 2021, and you accounted for it. And then the second was to see how we can revitalize the economy after the negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why we also put in 4.6 billion. And then we have accounted for the 3.9 billion that we use. Mr. Speaker, with this, I believe that we have brought the matter to rest. Let's admit that you thought we couldn't account for it, and we have now accounted for it. Let's put it to rest and then move on. The Auditor General at the end of the day will also come and account for, will also go through the books and account for every money that we have spent on COVID-19, both directly and indirectly. So, Mr. Speaker, we thank you for this opportunity to tell the whole of Ghana that clearly these monies came in and this is how we have utilized it. So I believe that from today, let us admit that we erred in telling Ghanaians that we have squandered the money. Clearly, it is all clear here that we have the money, we have used it, we have utilized it for the benefit of Ghanaians, and that is why, by God's grace, we did not see what we saw in other countries. If we had sat down and done nothing, maybe the effect would have been bad. But thanks be to God that He gave us our president in the person of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and that is how come we are seeing the results we are seeing here. Let's admit it when it's right. When it's right, let us learn to admit it, that it is right. If it is wrong, we understand. But clearly, the way Ghana handled COVID, including its expenditures, is something that everybody can attest to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Honorable Adongo Isaac.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make comments about the statement that the minister just read to us on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the issue about COVID-19 expenditure, come to listen to you, and its accountability is a major issue that hinges on the credibility of our country. We've spent a lot of monies that don't belong to us, but the magnanimity of a taxpayer sitting somewhere else, in billions of dollars. Mr. Speaker, as I look through the documents that have been served in this House by the same government and the same minister in the past, I'm struggling to understand whether this document is picking the data from somewhere else or the government's own data, which is copiously reported in its own budget statement for 2021. Mr. Speaker, the issue my colleague raised about the statement of the president to the effect that we spent 17.7 billion, it cannot be the case that today you are reporting that you spent 12 billion. How many months after the president spoke? As a matter of fact, we expect a better record to be showing that it is more than 17.7 billion. So right away, we become very confused that the numbers are now reversing backwards. From 17.7 to 12.2 or 12.0. Mr. Speaker, if we make a mistake and we call him tomorrow, it will be 9 billion. That is the problem. That is the problem. Mr. Speaker, one of my biggest difficulties is that this is a house of records. The minister appeared before this house and presented the 2021
budget statement and economic policy. In that document, the minister reported to us where he has received monies for COVID-19 and how much he has spent. Mr. Speaker, this is not my document. This is the Minister for Finance's own document, which is a record in this House. Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 274 of that statement of the budget, particularly under Appendix 12B, performance summary of funding sources, Mr. Speaker, all the sources that the minister raised the money, he reported the total at 19.3, which he has rightly reported in this report, except that he provided utilization that he had already done in each of the areas that he has listed. He actually even indicated how much of those utilizations are as a matter of loans to finance the deficit, and how much of it is our own money that doesn't go into the deficit. Mr. Speaker, the minister concluded that all the monies we borrowed that was utilized and not sitting in any bank account ended up at about 16.4 billion. He reported in that same document that when he now adds our own money, which in this case is the money he drew down on our contingency vote or contingency fund, the total amount is 18.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't look like 12 billion. In fact, that is 50% underreporting. From the minister's own document before this House, he is unable to speak to the same numbers a year after. That is very serious. Mr. Speaker, if I take the numbers the minister is reporting for 2021, that he spent 3.9, and I add it to the figure he gave me for 2020, Mr. Speaker, I get total expenditure on COVID of 22.1 billion, the minister's own report. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not reporting to us 10 billion Ghana cedis of our own money.
Why? Why?
In his own report. This is not my report. This is the budget statement of the Minister for Finance,
And then
which is a public record in this House. And that after almost a year, 6 billion has disappeared, 10 billion has disappeared, and it is now a Koshoko 12 billion. Mr. Speaker, we must be very serious with this House. And we must be serious with the international community that gave us our money.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this is an affront to democracy. And I sit here and I can't even trust documents you give to me because I don't know the lifespan of that document. In fact, 2 days later, that document will not be the same.
How much more the Bible?
How can I be relying on this type of data from the same source? Mr. Speaker, it is very, very serious. And Mr. Speaker, I've heard my colleagues try to say that because the Auditor General will bring us a report, we should not probe this. Mr. Speaker, our audit practice and reporting does not provide a room for special audit to be presented on COVID alone. The audit report will be reporting the totality of government finances and public finances. But then we have approved a special expenditure. We have gotten special funding. We are struggling to get to the bottom of that matter. That requires a special.
Absolutely.
And that our current arrangement of audit do not give us the opportunity to get what we want. And what we want is that we want to be sure whether it is 17.7 as reported by the President, whether it is 12 billion as reported by the Finance Minister today, or it is the 22 billion he reported to us last year. Mr. Speaker, this cannot be something that will require the Auditor General to give us an omnibus account. Mr. Speaker, to do justice to the people of Ghana, to reclaim the credibility of the political class in the utilization of our resources, there is an urgent need for Parliament to reclaim its integrity by making sure that we take steps to go to the bottom of these 3 conflicting numbers that are exposing the reporting of our country. Mr. Speaker, we have heard voice notes We have heard audios that are going around of certain political candidates claiming that our COVID money was shared to them for elections. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious indictment on us.
Honorable member, comments on the statement made by the minister. Comments on the statement made by the Minister of Finance.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, then I withdraw. But suffice it to say that I am struggling to reconcile the numbers from the Minister for Finance in two different documents published by he himself and that of the President of the Republic. And I'm at pains to see how the Auditor General's report will resolve this matter. On this basis, Mr. Speaker, I would like to support the call that Parliament must take its destiny into its own hands and get to the bottom of this matter. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah.
Honorable members, we now have to listen to the comments from the Deputy Majority Leader, Honorable Afinyo Markin.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this treasure space to make comments on the submissions made by the Honorable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, today, history will record that the minority created its own cul-de-sac. Upon creating so much impression about the COVID expenditure, and when the opportunity came, it entered into its own ditch. Mr. Speaker, I have listened to the comment by my respected colleagues in the minority. Mr. Speaker, so many inconsistencies in the comment from, whereas the Honorable Atuforsen submits that the Honorable Minister of Finance must be commended for his consistency in reporting. His other colleague, Honorable Adongo, is on his own route, saying other things. Mr. Speaker, in my view, the minority as a group should have come with a consistent common ground to advocate a position so that Ghanaians would understand that. Mr. Speaker, I align with the finance minister and we are on the same position. Your side is inconsistent, whereas Honorable Atuforsen, who has been in government before, appreciates the fact that there has been consistency and is commending the finance minister. Others are taking the finance minister to the cleaners. These are comments, Mr. Speaker, that posterity is going to judge them on. These are comments that, Mr. Speaker, hands up forever will remember that, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atuforsen, in his comments, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atuforsen, Mr. Speaker, truth results in bravery. And the ranking member on finance has today, after all, Mr. Speaker, after all the attacks.
Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
I definitely defer to you because of your position. But so far, what you read yourself as the standing orders talks about comments on the statement made by the minister. Not statements made or comments made by other members. But I agree with you that in making your comments, you have to refer to earlier comments. But you have not made any comment of your own so far.
Mr. Speaker, you are well placed in the east. You are well placed in the east of this chamber to guide. And I take a cue. Mr. Speaker, suffice to state that before my own comment, I must commend him. And Mr. Speaker, if we don't compliment each other in this chamber will collapse. Mr. Speaker, our duty as Democrats in upholding this democracy is to compliment each other. And my respected colleague Atu Fossey, Mr. Speaker, the ranking member.
He has elected to be truthful. He has elected to be truthful today. He has elected to be
former deputy finance minister.
He has elected to be truthful today.
PhD, etc., etc. Today
He has elected to be truthful.
has subjected himself to facts. Mr. Speaker, having said that, my own comment. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Finance Minister, although he walks through the valley of the shadow of death, his faith has led him to fear no evil. And where the name of the Lord is invoked, trust that no danger shall ensue. And today, Mr. Speaker, I shall refer my colleagues as part of my comment to the 1 and 152 of the rules of this House. We should not, in our desperate attempt to bring down a government policy, or in our desperate attempt to get power, to render the rules odious. These rules are there to guide all of us. We have committees in Parliament. If, Mr. Speaker, in the comment of Honorable Atu Fossey, he contends that, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atu Fossey contends that he does acknowledge that indeed the Ministry of Finance did not do the specific expenditures. He does contend, and that's factual, and I commend him for that. If that is so, and we agree and believe same to be true, then let us rely on the committees of Parliament. We don't need a special committee. We don't need another committee. Mr. Speaker, are my friends going to be tolerant? I listen to them quietly. Are my friends going to be tolerant? Mr. Speaker, this is a beautiful chamber where we make comments and enjoy each other. May they be quiet and listen to me. It's my turn now. Mr. Speaker, the point is, we should not render the rules of this House odious, except when there is an exceptional situation. And so far in their submissions, there hasn't been any comment arguing exceptional circumstance. I believe that if we are dealing with expenditures at the Ministry of Health, the Health Committee has the capacity. In any event, I see this call for a special committee as a rehash, as another approach to reintroduce a motion that was defeated on this House on procedural grounds. Mr. Speaker, there is going to be a constitutional approach in even further dealing with the very concerns they are asking. We have an Auditor General who has a mandate, a constitutional mandate, to deal with expenditures from various ministries, agencies, and departments. So, Mr. Speaker, nothing can be hidden from the people of Ghana. But, Mr. Speaker, because the majority leader is going to round up, I will not go further, except to state for the records that when you are dealing with trust funds, and this one I would want to direct my submission at Honorable Atu Fossey, he is strongly in his comment. I don't want to say you criticized the finance minister or you thought he failed to account for it, but Mr. Speaker, the law must be clear. I know generally that was your expectation, but it is a fund being managed by its trustees. And he indicated that this is the fact. You are saying public funds, Mr. Speaker. Our laws are clear on what constitutes public funds. And I do not want to at all, you know, we share the same esprit de corps. And I wouldn't want to, when you err, I would want to be magnanimous. When I err, I expect the same thing from you. But, Mr. Speaker, the contention that the Minister of Finance has failed to render an account on that trust fund because it's public funds, Mr. Speaker, with the greatest respect. Mr. Speaker, with the greatest respect. Sometimes we all err. Mr. Speaker, we all err sometimes. But on this occasion, I dare contend that in his comment on that aspect of the submission, as contained in paragraph 14, Honorable Atto-Forson got it entirely wrong. I hold that view respectfully, that he got it all wrong. The minister stated the fact. The minister did not veer away from the fact. The minister has been consistent, has been transparent, and today, nobody can say that during the lockdown, we didn't serve hot meals. Nobody can say that during the lockdown, Ghanaians did not receive nose masks. Nobody can say that Parliament of Ghana was denying what it needed to protect the 275 of us. Mr. Speaker, by the grace of God, through the intervention of this government, through the proactiveness of the finance minister, none of us lost his life. All 275 of us are intact. All of us are here. We took our job. We were protected. And Mr. Speaker, what more? Mr. Speaker, we are here to receive the facts. And when the facts are given us, we should at least be fair in acknowledging. But so far, I conclude by saying that the minority, putting all their comments together, save that their leader is here to speak. And I trust that he's going on the path of Atto-Forson. I know, because what Atto-Forson has said, nothing can take it away from the record. The standard he has set cannot perish this afternoon. Nobody can attempt to perish what Atto-Forson has said, that the minister was consistent, was transparent. Mr. Speaker, I thank you without further submission.
We will now listen to the comments of the Minority Leader, Honorable Haruna Idris.
Mr. Speaker, let me first of all thank you for the leadership you have provided in supporting this House, the Parliament of Ghana, to demand an exact accountability from the Honorable Minister for Finance in pursuit of our primary role of exercising oversight. Mr. Speaker, how refreshing that when you go to the preamble of our Constitution, it emphasizes freedom, justice, probity, and accountability. Mr. Speaker, we are all holding the statement from the Honorable Minister for Finance. May I, with respect, Mr. Speaker, refer you to page 11, in particular paragraph 34 of the Honorable Minister of Finance statement. He states, and I quote, "Transfer of 1.5 billion to the statutory funds in line with the approved budget to enable them deliver on their mandate." Mr. Speaker, statutory funds, especially the common fund, is established by Article 252 of the Constitution as revenue-driven. How then can you use a loan for purpose of statutory funds? Since when have borrowing funds become revenue? Borrowing. that you would allocate 1.501 billion to statutory funds from borrowed amounts, when the Constitution requires that a percentage of total revenue, not a percentage of total borrowing, is dedicated to the statutory funds. Mr. Speaker, then in the same page, Mr. Speaker, same page 10, paragraph 33C, this is what the Minister for Finance has to say. The establishment of the Development Bank Ghana to address gaps in the Ghanaian credit market, especially the availability of medium and long-term finance for the private sector. Then, Mr. Speaker, my emphasis, a total of 853 million. Few days ago, the President was reported in the Ghanaian media on this particular matter. Mr. Speaker, same Minister of Finance statement, the amount of money he received from the European Union, which was meant for the purpose of establishing the Development Bank, Mr. Speaker, in the Minister's statement, page 4, I quote, is 504 million. So you have spent 800 million on the establishment of Development Bank, when you are also accounting for the EU only giving you 504 million. Yet the people of Ghana are aware that the Development Bank was established with seed money from the EU money of 853 million. We need the fine detail. Here you are providing for 504 million in your table, table 1, paragraph 9, whilst you are reporting 800 million, a discrepancy of almost 300 million Ghana cedis. And we want to know, even the Development Bank is now established that it's wholly established with statutory funds, even though we take note that this Parliament of Ghana was not given the opportunity to legislate on it, even with our sad experience of over 21 billion being spent on cleansing banks. You only needed Parliament to help you, to guide you in the establishment of new banks. We want reconciliation to it. Mr. Speaker, I'm also holding with me here message on the state of the nation by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, presented to this August House Wednesday, 30th March 2022 at Parliament House. And Mr. Speaker, I refer you to page 4, and I quote His Excellency the President. Mr. Speaker, in all, data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion or 4.6% of GDP has been spent in containing the pandemic since 2020. President of Ghana, 17.7 billion. Minister of Finance, 12 billion. Who should we believe? Who should we believe? The President or the Minister? 17 billion and 12 billion. Then, Mr. Speaker, who should we believe? Further, Mr. Speaker, the President also had this to say in the same page 4 of the State of the Nation address. It took an unbudgeted 1.9 billion to assure that our children and teaching staff went back to school. Mr. Speaker, President of Ghana, 1.9 billion. May I refer you to the Honorable Minister of Finance statement here, page 11, paragraph 36. The President says 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is reporting 1.119 billion. Another discrepancy in page 36, and I read, an amount of 1,119.73 million was allocated for mass school reopening in January 2021. Yet the President says in his State of the Nation 1.9 billion, and you are giving us 1.1 billion. Another unexplained discrepancy. So, Mr. Speaker, for us, a probe and an open public inquiry into COVID expenditure beyond the headline numbers of the Minister of Finance is inevitable and an imperative. We are not looking for headline figures. I spent 12 billion. 12 billion on what? On what? We need the expenditure returns and expenditure details of every amount. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Atuforson also raises the fundamental issue of accountability of the COVID Trust Fund, which is established by an Act of Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, reason we are asking for accountability, we know that beyond public-spirited individuals who were determined to support the president to save lives, we are not questioning that he needed to save lives, but save lives in the arena of probity and accountability. In that COVID Trust Fund, Mr. Speaker, we are told that the National Health Insurance Authority contributed 250,000, Ghana Stock Exchange 100,000, GMPC 1 million, Ghana Gas 1 million, Senate 500,000. These are all public funds that must be accounted for to the Parliament of Ghana. That is what we are demanding. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what makes the case for a public investigation, a public inquiry, whether it's ad hoc committee, it's a finance committee, it's a committee. We want an open public hearing on how COVID expenditure was done in the name of this republic. So, Mr. Speaker, I only can be commending you. Then I conclude, Mr. Speaker. And in concluding, for the record, Mr. Speaker, let's refer to program resources, Minister's Word, page 4. He provides in table 1. And Mr. Speaker, in table 1, he gives us where he got the resources from. Again, conspicuously missing in these resources, Mr. Speaker, in page 4. And I have the Hansard for 14th October 2020. And this was IFAD loan, Government of Republic of Ghana, represented by the Ministry of Finance and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, for an amount of 20 million United States dollars to finance the implementation of the emergency support to rural livelihood and food systems exposed to COVID-19. First of all, we want to find out whether farmers actually benefited from this facility. Then, whether or not this account, this $20 million, has been accounted for in the COVID resources. This is Parliamentary Hansard, 16th October 2020, Friday, unaccounted. So, Mr. Speaker, for us, I'll speak, let me do the tables, Mr. Speaker, then I can conclude. Mr. Speaker, page 4. The minister accounts for 19.3 billion 600 as program support received. Then, Mr. Speaker, when you count expenditure on COVID-19, status update on COVID-19 expenditure, page 6, he accounts for 12 billion. Then the president accounts for 17.7 billion. So the House of people will say, good enough. To which, where is the missing money? 17.7 billion against 12 billion, against 19 billion, against 12 billion. Where is the money? So this makes our case compelling for a probe and an investigation. Mr. Speaker, so once again, I should thank you for enabling this House to exercise true oversight. This is what the Ghanaian people expect you and this Parliament to do, to hold ministers accountable, to protect the public purse by demanding accountability of COVID-related expenditure. The President says 17.7 billion. The Minister says 12 billion. Yet he received 19 billion. Naskanu wine, the rest of the money we are demanding. So, Mr. Speaker, we demand that you refer this statement to a committee of Parliament, whether it's an existing committee or a standing committee, to probe COVID expenditure beyond the headline numbers, and for this committee to demand expenditure returns, Mr. Speaker, so that we will be seen protecting the public purse. I rest my case. I thank you, Mr.
Honorable members, the last comment will be made by the majority leader and then leader of government business. Honorable Osei Mensah Bonsu.
Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity to make some brief comments about the presentation of the Minister responsible for finance in respect of the COVID-19 expenditures. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has been summoned to this House to make a statement on COVID-19 expenditures for 2020 and 2021. Mr. Speaker, the Minority Leader has reminded us that what we are doing is part of our oversight responsibilities. And I agree entirely with him that we need to position Parliament to be able to inquire into expenditures by way of providing oversight to enable this country to know whether or not we have value for money in the expenditures that we incur. Mr. Speaker, the Minority Leader has quoted the preamble of the Constitution to us, which emphasizes probity and accountability. And probity and accountability we must ensure within the strictures of the law. Mr. Speaker, it cannot just be populism. It must be done within the strictures of the law. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance allocates resources for various expenditures by the various bodies, ministries, departments, agencies, the other arms of government, including even Parliament, the judiciary, constitutional creatures. He makes allocations for expenditures to these bodies. Mr. Speaker, it is not for the Ministry of Finance to follow them on the path of their expenditures. That indeed is reserved to us in Parliament, the various committees, to do that. So when you summon the Minister of Parliament to come and make a statement on expenditures given to the various bodies, as I said, including Parliament, in my considered opinion, it's a bit misplaced. The Speaker says so because Parliament was given resources to deal with COVID. So Parliament itself did that. Have we submitted any expenditures to the Minister for him to respond to Parliament? So you see what you are doing. It's completely misplaced. Mr. Speaker, we have committees in this House. And the committees, as provided for under Article 106, 103, Mr. Speaker, I should say. And I'm happy the first person who spoke to the Minister's statement related to that. Mr. Speaker, it provides, and Article 103.3 says, committees of Parliament, the committee that we have established, the committees of Parliament shall be charged with such functions, including the investigation and inquiry into the activities and administration of ministries and departments as Parliament may determine. Mr. Speaker, we have the various sector committees, and I keep talking to this matter every time in this House. I don't want to say that our committees have been negligent.
Honorable Majority Leader, I'm compelled to suspend sitting for 10 minutes.
Mr. Speaker,
We'll be back within
we
10
appreciate
minutes if you continue.
All right, so Parliament has suspended sitting for 10 minutes, and the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, went to the House to account for the COVID-19 expenditure and also other things. Among other things, he said that 600 million Ghana cedis has been used for the Agenda 111, which is to build 111 hospitals across the country, and the project is even yet to start, but that is the amount of money that has been earmarked for that project. Also, 1.119 billion cedis allocated for mass school reopening that was indicated by the Finance Minister, and also 853 million cedis has been used as seed capital for Development Bank Ghana, which was recently launched here in Accra. But the minority has also refuted some claims that have been made by the Finance Minister. They say that he has really not accounted for almost 7.3 billion Ghana cedis, and also 598 million Ghana cedis were used for nose mask and Veronica buckets. That's according to the Finance Minister. So we try to get an economist on the line to give us his views. I understand we have Daniel Enim, who is the president at Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Daniel, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I believe you've listened to the proceedings and the accounts given by the Finance Minister. What do you make of that? Hello, Dan. Can you hear me? Hello, Dan. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I believe you listened to the proceedings in Parliament. What do you make of what the Finance Minister said today? Can you kindly unmute your microphone? I cannot hear you. Right, Daniel, I still cannot hear you. If you have not unmuted your microphone, can you kindly unmute for me? Right, and while we wait for Michael to unmute his microphone, news just coming in indicates that we have recorded a first case of Ebola in the northern region. Not good news at all. Not good news. That is news just coming in, and of course we'll follow up on that and bring you more details of this particular issue in our subsequent bulletin. Joined us. This is an extended version of Newsbeat. We're picking a live feed from Parliament, where the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, was there moments ago to give account of COVID-19 expenditure and also tell us about accounts of certain projects ongoing in the country. And Breaking news just coming in indicates that the country has recorded its first case of Ebola in the northern region. Some economic perspective onto this issue and try to speak with an economist, Daniel Enim, who we're struggling to establish connection with. As I indicated earlier, this is an extended version of Newsbeat here on Metro TV. We just brought you a live feed from Parliament where the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, has been there to give account of how monies earmarked for COVID-19 were spent. And he said that we spent 598 million Ghana cedis on nose masks and Veronica buckets during the peak of the pandemic. Among other things, the minority in Parliament have refuted so many claims made by him, and they say that he has been unable to account for 7.3 billion Ghana cedis. They say that we were able to mobilize 9 billion Ghana cedis, and we spent 12 billion Ghana cedis. So they're asking the finance minister where the remaining 7 billion Ghana cedis is. Right, so this is an extended version of the show as I indicated earlier, but I do have my colleague Abdallah Mohammed, who is our parliamentary affairs correspondent, standing by in Parliament right now. Let's cross over. Right. I understand we do not have him on at the moment, but... Right, Abdallah, can you hear me now? Hello, Abdallah?
Yes, I can hear you, Ken.
Yes, tell us more.
Ken, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so as you rightly mentioned, the Speaker has actually suspended sitting for the next 10 minutes to allow for cool heads so that he would reconvene the House for a consideration of the submissions being made by various members from the minority and majority side of the House. The person who was actually on the floor before the Speaker adjourned sitting for 10 minutes was the majority leader. He was making a case and trying to question why the minority side would demand a public inquiry into this particular issue, which in his opinion, the finance minister has adequately addressed in the presentation made to the House of Legislature a while ago. I must quickly say that this is not the first time or the second time the minority side is attempting to ensure that there's a public inquiry or an ad hoc committee to probe into the circumstances under which these various sums were spent by the ministries, departments, and agencies in the COVID-19 fight. So we are hoping that once the House reconvenes, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, will make a statement on this particular issue. So it is either he would actually set up a committee or refer it to the committee that would work on the issue, or he would decide to just say that, look, I buy into the suggestions by the majority side that the Auditor General at the end of the day is going to look into these various sums and ensure that there is probity and accountability in the way these monies have been expended, especially within the ministries, departments, and agencies. It an exciting showdown as we hear both sides of the House try to argue on the submission or the statement made by the Honorable Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Ken.
I mean, the minority is backed by the Speaker, or the Speaker sides with the minority, and you said it will go to where? And if it goes to the place you've mentioned, what is the likely outcome?
So the minority side, okay, if you heard all the submissions made by members of the minority, especially at the leadership level, their request is that the Speaker should set up an ad hoc committee to go into of the various ministries, departments, and agencies that have actually spent these monies. The amount, the 12 billion that the finance minister has mentioned that has been spent so far in the management of the COVID-19 situation in the country. The minority side, by their submission, is demanding that the Speaker sets up an ad hoc committee which may compose of members of the minority and the majority side. But their request is for the chairman of the committee to be from the minority side, so that they will ensure that at the end of the day, prudence and accountability is guaranteed. So the majority side, on the other hand, is saying that, look, this is not the first time you are demanding for this type of inquiry. You have repeatedly mentioned it, and even at one instance, it was shut down by the Speaker. We are hoping that within the various ministries, departments, and agencies, prudence is going to be done. They would be audited. These accounts are going to be audited by the various respective audit agencies attached to these various ministries, even before the Auditor General himself conducts a forensic audit of these accounts. So why are you hell-bent on demanding that the Speaker should set up an ad hoc committee? So, like I said, we cannot tell at this juncture whether the Speaker would yield to the demand of the minority or the majority side. It would depend on whether he is satisfied at the end of the day on the answers that have been provided by the Finance Minister, Ken.
Abdallah Mohammed, keep us updated there at the House of Parliament. He's a parliamentary affairs correspondent. We'll come back to you later on in the program. You're still watching an extended version of Newsbeat here on Metro Television. We're trying to get a member of parliament on the line to have a conversation with us on these issues raised in parliament. And also, let me remind you that the country has recorded a first case of Ebola in the northern part of the country. Outbreak that happened somewhere in 2014 had, okay, understand. Right, let's go on to the telephone lines and speak to Honorable Benjamin Kodo, who is a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament. Honorable, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. What do you make of the Finance Minister's accounts today?
I think that the presentation still does not meet the test of probity and accountability. The Minister of Finance has given or allocations, but these are not detailed.
Honorable, I'm struggling to hear you. Your line is pretty bad. Can you kindly reposition yourself for me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Honorable. Kindly carry on.
Yes, what I'm saying is that the presentation still does not meet the test of probity and accountability. Okay. He has provided headline figures, and we do not have details of the actual expenditures given. Number two, the figures presented here contradict figures given out in other earlier statements in the budget and the State of the Nation address by the President. So which one are we to take? In any case, why should it take so much effort as the Finance Minister to come and make a statement to Parliament? Why? So we think that these issues have to be probed in greater detail by a committee competently set up by Parliament. That is our opinion.
Right. Honorable, you did mention that there have been some inconsistencies in their account, but on the floor just moments ago, the Deputy Finance Minister, Abena Osei-Asare, mentioned that, in fact, they have been very consistent with their accounts.
That is the word from his mouth. But while we say there are inconsistencies, you have Finance Minister saying 17.6 million. In another document, we have 12 billion. That's just 17.6 million. Sorry, it is billion. 17.6 billion. In another document, we have 12 billion. And in another one, we have 22 billion, all presented by the same ministry. That is why we think that to reconcile these figures, we need a proper proof. Right. So Abena cannot say that they have been consistent. No. Right. And some of the headline figures, we are worried. For instance, how do you use COVID-19 as a vehicle for raising funds to establish a bank? How do you use COVID-19 as a vehicle for paying statutory funds, which you have locked up 1.5 billion? How should that be done? That is why we think that these things are not right.
Right. Honorable, do you side with your colleague Kesel Atoforsen, who says that about 7.3 billion Ghana cedis is unaccounted for?
Your line has rather faded out.
Right, Honorable, I'm afraid I have to end the conversation here and return back to Parliament because the Majority Leader, Osei-Chairman Bunsu, is currently on the floor. Let's cross over.
Would not accumulate as we are seeing today. So today he has about 16 questions, beyond what he has done, about 16 questions to respond to. The Speaker, we met when we first came to Parliament in 1997, Mr. Kwame Pepra as the Minister for Finance. Mr. Kwame Pepra was not coming to this house. The person who was coming to this house was the Honorable, I think, Victor Selemi. He was always in the house with us. And the house agreed that Victor should take the place of Mr. Kwame Pepra. On occasions, there were murmurs, and people bemoaned that he himself must come here. But we know that the position of the Ministers of Finance, Mr. Speaker, they are in very precarious positions, dealing with so many things at the same time. So perhaps we should come to some determination on this. But having said so, Mr. Speaker, in the governance architecture, Parliament is the body charged with the oversight responsibility to trace and track the usage of allocated resources allocated to the various ministries, departments, and agencies, the other arms of government, as I've said, as well as the other constitutional bodies, and also some state enterprises. The Ministry of Finance has the responsibility to do the allocation of resources of state, and that is expressed in the budget statement presented to the House from time to time. After the allocations have been made, it behoves the various committees of the House under Article 103.3 and indeed Part 20 of our standing orders to trace and track these allocations to ensure that the nation has value for money in these allocations. The ministry, as midwife, will always be in readiness to work with any such parliamentary committee if they want additional information. Mr. Speaker, that is how Parliament works. Unfortunately, we must all admit that by the structure of our parliamentary committees, the committees themselves are not strong enough. How do we restructure the committees to let them have the strength to perform these oversight responsibilities? That's where Ghana's Parliament is lacking. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead that this cannot be counted as one of the numerous sins of the Minister of Finance, if he has any sins. And I believe he has many sins indeed. Mr. Speaker, when Parliament has done its work, indeed, with the rolling out of any budget cycle, if for the committees to follow the ministries, the constitutional bodies, the other arms of government, in how they are spending their allocations and report timeously to this House, the committees don't do that. So
we are always looking at the Auditor General to fulfill its responsibility once the year ends. That's not supposed to be the architecture of governance. If you want proper probity and accountability, as stressed by the minority leader, the Speaker, the committees of Parliament should be made to work. And the Minister of Finance cannot take the place of the committees of Parliament. The Speaker, the Auditor General at the end of every year is required to complement the efforts of Parliament by auditing and reporting on the public accounts of Ghana to Parliament, and that is provided for by Article 1872. The Auditor General must submit his report of audit to Parliament, drawing attention to any irregularities in the accounts audited in line with Article 187(5). Mr. Speaker, now, I'm not oblivious of the imperative of Order 67(1)H, which provides that
Honourable Majority Leader, just a minute. Honourable members, in view of the nature of business before the House, I direct that business be held outside the normal prescribed hours. I so direct. Yes, Majority Leader, continue.
The Speaker, as I was saying, I'm aware of the imperative of Order 67(1)H, which provides that a question shall not be asked, the answer to which is readily available in official publications. The budget statement that we are all quoting from is an official publication. And Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 expenditures have been broadly provided for in pages 274 and 275 in the 2021 budget statement and economic policy. Then Appendix 1 of the 2021 mid-year review also provides for this, as copiously quoted from by the Honourable Atuforsen. These are official publications. Mr. Speaker, also on page 335 of the 2022 budget, these pieces of information that we require or we are looking for are provided in these official publications. And our orders provide that if they are provided for in official publications, then we should not ask questions relating to them. Mr. Speaker, beyond that, and with respect to the granular issues at the various ministries, departments, and agencies, the arms of government, including parliaments, as well as the constitutional bodies, as I was saying, I'm afraid the job of tracing and tracking expenditures is that of committees of Parliament and not the Minister for Finance. But notwithstanding, and I believe to set minds at ease, the Minister has been here, and for the avoidance of doubt, he has come to provide the information, the relevant information to us. Mr. Speaker, I think for the umpteenth time, it's important to go back to bullet 6 of the information that the Minister provided us, because some fetish is being made about some inconsistencies in figures that have been quoted by the President, the Vice President, and indeed the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it is abundantly clear that what people are referring to as the shortfall is provided for in bullet 6. And for the avoidance of doubt, Mr. Speaker, let me quote what the Minister said to us. He said, furthermore, during the presentation of the 2020 mid-year fiscal policy, I indicated that the supplementary request included a program funding of 19.3 billion from the various funding sources to support budget both directly and indirectly. On the expenditure side, an amount of 11.16 billion was programmed for COVID-19 related expenses. Details are attached as Appendix 1. The difference of 8.14 billion Ghana cedis was programmed to provide for shortfalls in revenue. So when people talk to that there is a shortfall that has not been explained, Mr. Speaker, it is here in bullet 6. Why are people elected to just close their eyes over this? Why? Mr. Speaker, clearly it's a deliberate attempt to position the minister and cause disaffection for him. That's trying to cover up. There's no cover up. The answer is here. Read and you see.
Mr. Speaker, so it's much ado about nothing. Now, as I have said, Article 103(3) provides for the setting up of committees. Now, people are calling for the setting up of ad hoc committee. What's the business of an ad hoc committee in this? Mr. Speaker, our orders provide in Order 191. And let me quote Order 191. Mr. Speaker, 191 provides that the House may at any time by motion appoint a special or ad hoc committee to investigate any matter of public importance, to consider any bill that does not come under the jurisdiction of any of the standing or select committees. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, these expenditures fall under the various subject matter committees. In particular, health, Mr. Speaker, COVID expenditures were incurred by Parliament. COVID expenditures were incurred by the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, even Finance. Mr. Speaker, so these committees must be liberated to work and do better work. And when they have finished, they will submit their reports to us. So they are covered. They are subject matter committees that have the responsibility of tracing and tracking these expenditures. And if there are subject matter committees that can have responsibility, why can't we ask for the setting up of an ad hoc committee? Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm concerned, it has no basis. It has no basis. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we should, as I've said, liberate the relevant committees to work and bring us a report. If we want to have the reports, because there are so many matters that must be done, Speaker, we work with the committee that we charged, the Defense Committee, to go into the shooting incident. Mr. Speaker, we can't say to them, Parliament is adjourning, I guess, on the 26th or 27th of July. We can then say that these committees, the relevant committees, must trace and track their locations with respect to COVID and report to us, maybe within 2 weeks, or maybe not exceeding 3 weeks. The Speaker will be doing justice to this House, rather than saying that we should set up an ad hoc committee. I don't see the justification in this at all. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I believe we should express our gratitude to the Minister for responding to this House to give us the briefing that he has served to this House. I believe anybody who has listened to us objectively and conscientiously will know that the Minister has not made any attempt to hide anything. He's come out with the truth and nothing but the truth. Mr. Speaker, if there are any other matters, can we refer them to the various committees to continue further inquiries and investigations so that minds will be set at ease? And Mr. Speaker, if indeed something untoward has also been done, they are not about to force me to say that we should do a reconciliation of the committees. I don't know what this is not an appropriations committee. It's not an appropriations committee. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity granted, and I believe that from now on we shall leave this House in peace and with the understanding that indeed the Minister has done justice to the invitation that was extended to him to come and respond to COVID expenditures. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Honorable members, I want to give the minister the opportunity, if he so desires, to any comment on what has been said so far. If he feels it's not necessary, I'll give.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Speaker, and really want to take the opportunity to thank members for this invitation. I like the spirited nature of the conversation, and I'm certainly available to support any further questions that people may have outside of this chamber to ensure that there's clarity, because I think in clarifying these things, it also gives confidence to our various partners and also supports the nation to know that the extraordinary measures that the President took, such that, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, over 6 million lives were lost in the world globally, accounted to by COVID. Africa had about 253,000, and Ghana, Mr. Speaker, had 1,445, attesting to the fact of what we all did to save lives. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate it.
Honorable members, the Minister for Finance responded to the call of the House to account for the utilization of the COVID-19 funds. The Minister has accordingly responded to that today through a statement under our Standing Order 70. The Standing Order 70 emanates from the article that has been quoted extensively by members, and that is Article 103, particularly Clause 3. Honorable members, I must say that Article 103, Clause 3 is not the same as the function of the Auditor General. There's a difference between investigating and inquiring into activities and administration of ministries and departments and auditing, which is usually conducted by the Auditor General. There's a difference. And so we cannot say that because the Auditor General is going to audit accounts, Parliament is disenabled from going into, by way of investigation and inquiry, into the utilization of the COVID-19 funds. And so we have the mandate to do so. I did request from the table office to be sure of what was communicated to the minister. Because when you look at the order paper today, that is item 7 on the order paper, it says, statements, Minister for Finance to brief the House on COVID-19 expenditure by government. But the directive was for the minister to appear before the House to account for monies approved by Parliament for utilization on COVID-19 relief programs. And so you have to amend the order paper accordingly. It is not for him to come and brief the House. It's for him to appear to account for monies approved by Parliament for utilization on COVID-19 relief programs. So the minister has accordingly, according to the mandate of the ministry, given us the broad lines of the monies that they have released to the various ministries, departments, and agencies for the purpose of us countering the onslaught of COVID-19 in 2020, 2021. I didn't see figures on 2022, even though I know COVID is still on and there's still expenditure. At the end of the day, the comments of members are calling for, some members are calling for the House to set up an ad hoc committee to investigate and inquire into this matter. I am persuaded by those who believe that we have already existing committees that can carry out this function. I believe from the comments that there are still a lot of gaps that we need to throw light on. Honorable members, apart from the figures that our attention has been drawn to, between what he said today and earlier statements which are contained in documents, I also think that the paragraph 15 of the minister's statement, where he said, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measures excludes funds of the National COVID-19 Trust Fund and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund, unquote. As from this statement, if you read Article 178, I believe, Article 178 of the Constitution is when the monies become public funds. For the avoidance of doubt, it's good I refer to the article for the edification of all of us. But before I even mention 178, when you read Article 175, it says, the public funds of Ghana shall be the consolidated fund, the contingency fund, and such other public funds as may be established by or under the authority of an act of Parliament. Now, the fund in question falls under the ambit of Article 175 and therefore qualifies to refer to as public fund. That fund, was it paid into the consolidated fund or it was being utilized by the trust? In that case, if it was not paid into a consolidated fund, it will not be possible for the Ministry of Finance to account for that, which meant that the trust will have to account for the utilization of that fund. This means that there's still the need for further investigation and inquiry into this matter. The 178 talking about withdrawals. No money shall be drawn from the consolidated fund except the relevant one is 178(1)(b), B, Roman 4, says no money shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund except B, where the issue of those monies has been authorized, Roman 4, by rules or regulations made under an act of parliament in respect of trust monies paid into the consolidated fund. And as I said, from the statement, one cannot tell whether it was paid into the consolidated fund or it was received by the trust and kept by the trust, and the trust itself was expending it. And so we need to go beyond the minister and to get in touch with the trust to be able to unearth these things. And therefore, there's a need for further investigation. It's with this direct that the Committee of Finance, ably supported by the Committee of Health, should investigate and inquire into the total receipts referred to as COVID-19 funds and how those funds were applied for the betterment of the people of this country. Definitely, we know without those funds, I don't know how many of us would have been alive by now. And we are lucky as a house that 275 of us survived. At least a number of us were caught by it, including the Minister of Finance himself, even though he's not a member of the House. We lost some good Ghanaians, quite painful, but at the end of the day, we performed far, far better than many, many countries in the world. Some parliaments lost members of parliaments. Some countries lost ministers. Some lost judges. And so many other important dignitaries, both traditional and social. And so some work has been done. But that doesn't justify that we should not perform our function of ensuring that the money was utilized efficiently, effectively, and economically. It's very, very important for us to do that, to allay the fears of Ghanaians. And this matter is of serious public concern. It's with this, I want to add that the committee should expedite action on this matter. You now know the ministries, the agencies to invite, including the Ministry of Finance. They have given us, for us to look at the figures between the ministry and that of the presidency and the others, try to reconcile them, and also now go into the details of the expenditure of the monies that the minister has released to the ministries, departments, and agencies. It's with this, I want to commend members for a very spirited conversation, as the minister will refer to it, and also to commend the minister for coming to respond to the call of the House, but to urge him that is in the interest of him, the ministry, and the government, for the people of Ghana to always constantly be informed about their tax monies or revenues generated for and on their behalf. There is no witch hunting in these matters. That's one of the very effective tools of good governance. And I'm happy the minister has come to respond to it. I also agree that the minister has a lot of work. And that is why this House always accepts representation. Luckily, the minister has about 3 strong men and 1 strong lady. There's a minister of state and then 3 deputy ministers. Or now there are 2. Oh, it's been reduced to 2. Okay. Yes, my friend, honorable member for Obuase, is no more a deputy minister. He is the chairman of the committee now. And so he lost out. So we now have the Minister of Finance with a Minister of State and 2 deputy ministers. And so when, Honorable Minister, you are caught up with other duties, please kindly ensure that you are effectively represented in this House by any of the 3. Yes. It's true that I was here when the late Honorable Victor Silumi was virtually the one transacting the business in the House for and on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Honorable Kwame Pepra. He only came on very serious business and not the normal questions and other things, but very serious business like budget and other things. So that is the spirit with which we work. And I want to end here by emphasizing the directive Yes. So the directive is for the Committee on Finance, supported by the Committee on Health, to investigate and inquire further into the application and utilization of all the revenues received, referred to as COVID-19 funds, and to report to the House. The timelines, because we are going on recess, and in view of the agenda of the rest of the meeting, I will want the report to be presented by the first month of our next meeting. First month of the next meeting will be in October, because by the 27th of this month, the House will be on recess. And the committee will need more than just these few weeks to do the work. So you have ample time to do your work, and please submit to us a very comprehensive report to settle this matter once and for all. I thank you so much for your patience and attention. I have been looking to see whether my deputies are available. Good. So I will, at this stage, hand over to the second deputy speaker, because I have to attend to another urgent matter. I hope to catch up with that. So, Minister, you are not yet discharged. You still have about 12 questions or so to answer. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming. Second deputy speaker to take the chair.
So that was the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Backbin, making his final submission there. And then he says there are still some loopholes in the minister's report. He also says there's a need for further investigations, and he has directed the Finance and Health Committees of Parliament to probe further the use of the funds, and they have up till 4 months to provide findings of what they found in that report. I understand we have Daniel Enyim to speak to us on the line right now. Good afternoon, Dan. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yes, so what do you make of the Speaker's report, the Finance Minister's report?
Yes, he has presented what, in his opinion, is the true reflection of how the money was expended or spent. And once there are questions, one would have expected him to provide further particulars. I was really enthused with the question posed by Honorable Arthur Folson in respect of the difference of 7.3 billion out of the 19.3 billion. The minister indicated that 12 billion or so was spent. So we wanted to find out the 7.3 billion, how the minister should have accounted for that, whether or not the money is lying in account A or whether or not government is using it for A, B, C, D. And I think it was a very legitimate question to have asked the honorable minister, you know. And then I think he also raised the issue of the sources, how the monies were, I mean, the sources of funding in respect of the COVID-19 fund. To me, I think it's also a very legitimate question. We need to know people, institutions that have donated, I mean, a very detailed account to that effect. Once it's a public money, I think that question is a very legitimate one, in my opinion. And I expect that going forward, they will do the needful to be able to address that particular issues raised by the honorable minister. I think he also raised the issue that those who really use the money ought to be brought before Parliament for further questioning. To me, that is only when there's a doubt in respect of the figures presented by the honorable minister. If that doubt is still on their minds, requesting that further interrogation ought to be done. To me, if indeed the finance ministry has really applied the money in a manner that it was expected, this shouldn't raise any debate. It should just be a straightforward kind of game. Okay, form the committee, let it interrogate. At the end of the day, to arrive at the same conclusion. So to me, I think it is a step in the right direction. It's a way of strengthening our governance system in terms of accountability. It's a way of ensuring that people will manage public funds in a manner that will ensure it benefits all of us. And that is not to suggest that probably ABCD has used the money in any way, but accountability is key. Right. And I'm of the view that a call for accountability, it is a step in the right direction. So
and do you think that accountability will be achieved since it has been directed to the Health and Finance Committees of Parliament?
Yes, well, they are expected to do the right thing, pursuant to the powers conferred on them by the Constitution. I expect them to do the needful and to be able to interrogate properly and account that, the presentation made by the Honorable Minister is a true reflection of what really transpired on the ground or otherwise. So they have that constitutional mandate to be able to do that. And that's the reason which they are there, and they are being paid by taxpayers' money. So we expected them to exercise a high sense of professionalism in the discharge of duty and take politics out of the game. And to us, or to my mind, when that is achieved, it is then that we can say, indeed, our governance system is working, our democracy is working. So they have that mandate and they have to discharge it professionally.
Dan, quickly, let's go through a few of the things the finance minister said. He said 600 million has been earmarked for Agenda 111, which has not even begun. Also, he did mention that 598 million Ghana cedis were spent on nose masks and Veronica buckets. The minority describes these figures as outrageous. What do you make of that?
Let me start with the Veronica bucket and then the nose mask. You know, in emergency situation, one is likely to take decision that you may not have the luxury to peruse in terms of having options. So, for instance, if in emergency you think company A, B, C, D have what it takes to give you the nose masks and then the Veronica buckets, the luxury of perusing costs and then looking for alternative may not be there. We've all experienced the novel nature of the pandemic. So in that particular respect, if any decision was taken, which probably could have ballooned the cost, to my mind, I think they ought to be forgiven in that particular perspective. Alternatively, where they have opportunity to consider alternative sources, I mean, in terms of cost, and probably then they ignore, then that counts for accountability. Secondly, if to the minority, or to Ghanaians were of the view that, the kind of amount that the minister has turned out and the kind of resources that were given in terms of fighting the COVID-19 couldn't match up with it, then of course we need to ask questions for further particulars to be provided. So these are some of the things that ought to be considered. In respect of the Agenda 101, 600 million, I think the minister, I agree. That project that is just to commence, and say you have allocated such an amount, about 600 million, just like you indicated rightly. they need to explain. Maybe probably the money is sitting in an account somewhere for same to be used for the commencement of the project, or some technical work has been done for which the money was extended or spent on. We need particulars. So once explanation has been provided, a very sound one, of course, then we'll all be at peace. But if it is opaque as presented, then of course questions ought to be asked, and then answers are supposed to be provided accordingly.
Right, Daniel. Thank you very much for speaking to us this afternoon. He is the president of Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Now, let's take you to another major issue that happened this afternoon. We had reports that the country had recorded a case of Ebola in the northern region. Let's go straight to that region and speak to our resident correspondent, Alhassan Dibaba. Dibaba, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. Right, I understand we're still trying to connect with Dibaba to confirm if indeed a case of Ebola has been recorded in the northern region. Now, Ebola, which started somewhere in 2014, the biggest outbreak yet in 2014, luckily the country was able to prevent it from entering our shores. I understand Alhassan Dibaba is back on the line. Dibaba, welcome to the show. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kenny.
Right. Can you confirm or deny the issue about an Ebola case being recorded in the northern region?
Thank you so much. I can confidently tell you that there's nothing like an Ebola case in the northern region. What happened was the fact that there is a simulation exercise going on in the northern region, organized by the Northern Regional Health Directorate to prepare their officers as to how to handle cases of such nature. So when the exercise was going on, some media houses or media persons were invited to cover the program. So when they went in there, I understand they didn't tell them that it was a simulation exercise. And for that matter, they recorded what was being said there. So when the news broke, there was shock in the northern region. People were panicking. And as media people were calling us to confess to them whether what is out in the public space is true or not. So I went straight to the Northern Regional Director of Health Services, and he told me that I will need to confirm this myself. For that matter, we should go to where the simulation exercise is taking place. So when we went to the place, we met them and they were doing the exercise. So I spoke to Hussein Mahama, who is the health disease control officer of the northern region. So let's go and listen to him and hear what he said when I met him.
Okay, so you're stating on authority.
We have a situation in Romo going on about Ebola condition, which seems to send people in a panic situation. So as professionals, technical people, we need to come out and let the community know that there is nothing to be panicked about. All right. So these are the steps we have put in place. And of course, when we pick the sample, we need to send the sample to a place that we can be sure of the diagnosis. So all these things, as I said, it should be in the act should be like a reality situation that you are dealing with. But its essence is not real. Well, you are right, in the sense that we are working as a team. So the team that invited these media people, I thought they handled that aspect, that understanding that this particular exercise is a simulation, it's not real. So that was just the assumption. And so when I was just granting them the interaction, that's why I did not, in the first place, notify them that this is just a simulation exercise. I thought Sister Patient did that with them already. She actually prompted me that the media people are ready. At this particular point in time, we can grant an interview. So I thought that one had really been dealt with by patients. I believe so. That's where I think the challenge or the mistake came from, and is giving us the actual information it's not true. It's just an exercise. It's not true. There's nothing that we should hide from you. just because you are making a follow-up. We have our national people in there. You know, we are being trained to handle our cases in terms of collection, analysis, interpretation, and sharing the information. So they came for us to stimulate and see as Public Health Emergency Operations Center, if we indeed we do have an outbreak of such a sort, how as a operation center, how are we going to handle it? So that at the end of the day, they will tell us that, well, these are areas we need to work on, and areas that we are doing well, we maintain that. And so that was just the essence. So it's actually not true. It's not true.
Right. Dibaba, share with us the atmosphere in the northern region at the moment, because I believe that rumors have started spreading that Ebola outbreak has been recorded in the region.
Yes, Kenneth, like I told you earlier, when the news broke out, a whole lot of people were calling us, most especially the media practitioners in the region, to confirm whether it was true that an Ebola case has been confirmed in the northern region. So seriously, people were panicking until it was confirmed that no, what was put in the public domain was not true. So people are now coming down, even though some still have believed that they are trying to deceive them, they are trying to make people come down. For that matter, the case where the issue was true. So people were not really happy for hearing it, and people were panicking. But currently, the tension is coming down as many media houses are now reporting that what was said earlier is not true. But people did not really feel comfortable after hearing the news. Right.
And what are the health officials in the region doing to calm nerves?
Yes, I spoke with the regional health director off camera, and he said he will engage a whole lot of media houses, most especially those local media houses here, to spread the information, most especially to the villages, to ensure that people really come down and to believe that this issue was not true.
Right. Alhassan Dibaba is our correspondent in the northern region. Thank you very much for that information. That'll be it for the extended version of Newsbeat. My name is Kenneth Jesse. See you soon.